Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Tanya Echols, PCC, 2022 ICF Professional Coaches Global Board Director.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to day 3. It's been a wonderful couple of days, and we're excited to move even further into our discussions today. We started off our first 2 days, day 1, talking about engagement and had our wonderful keynote speaker, Sarah Slidek, and some great discussion with our own panel around how we can engage and increase our membership. And day 2, we continued talking about education and growth. And for today, day 3, we're going to focus on innovation and succession as we look to the future. We hit that 50,000 member mark, and now we're looking towards 100. So excited for us to have our discussions today. So we're going to have a rich and lively discussion panel on inclusive leadership, and we're going to feature some chapter leaders from all over the world. We're going to engage in some breakout discussions, as you all are used to doing, and we'll also do some networking, and then we're going to close with a keynote on accountability and keeping the promises we make, a source of inspiration as we take what we've learned these last 3 days and move forward. The pre-workout videos, which can be found on the GLF website, are under the pre-work tab, included 2 panel discussions with our DEIJ add in extra letters, surprise, no new letters yet, DEIJ task force members, one on understanding the common language of DEIJ, and one on creating an inclusive chapter leader mindset. I highly recommend viewing these videos if you haven't already, and they do contain some great little nuggets of information and things that you can take away from the task force that can help you move forward in your own DEIJ initiatives in your chapters. Now, some of the things that stand out from these panel discussions is to keep in mind that we aren't limited by anything. We have the ability to understand what's going to work best for our chapters. We can include belonging. We can look at what justice looks like in our own chapters, in our own regions, in our own parts of the world. That we can also make sure that we understand that, yes, we're going to learn lots of wonderful things today, but know that some things that may apply for one chapter may not apply in a different community, in a different chapter. So the key to all of this is always, and we know this as coaches, work with the people in front of you. Learn who they are, understand their identity, understand their culture, and that will allow us to be able to best serve our members, ourselves, and the world. Now, in July 2020, the ICF Global Board of Directors approved the ICF Statement of Diversity, Inclusion, Belonging, and Justice. Staff and volunteer leaders from ICF's 6 family organizations subsequently co-signed on this statement. And this statement of principles reflects a position we invite every ICF member, credential holder, and accredited training provider to subscribe to. It includes the statement, we will place diversity, inclusion, belonging, and justice at the forefront of every decision we make within our association. As we continue the journey toward our vision, we will recommit ourselves to valuing the unique talents, insights, and experiences that every coach and client brings to the world. Now, in January 2022, just a few months ago, we hired our first DEIJ director, the wonderful Lakeisha Brooks, who I've had the opportunity to already do some work with, and we are excited to provide new DEIJ offerings through her work that she brings forth in the coming weeks, months, days, and years. So before we move into our programming for the day, we have a few quick housekeeping notes. Want to make sure we're all running on schedule here. Please use the chat function to share your thoughts throughout our sessions today. I know Nikki is out there and is going to help answer questions along with Anik and Sal and other folks. Also, please be respectful of others and be mindful of the ICF Code of Conduct and our core values of professionalism, collaboration, humanity, and equity. Now, with the exception of breakouts, all of our sessions will be recorded and posted on the GLF website within a few days of our event. So the website will be available through December 31st, 2022. So you have plenty of time to go back out and revisit things that you might have missed or wanted to dive into more deeply. Now, should you leave a session, just return to the event agenda page on the GLF website and click on the View Session button for the session that you want to attend. As long as you're logged into the site and you plan to attend the full day, you will not need to do anything further, as you'll be just moved automatically from session to session. So no worries about having to leave and come back in. If you stay here and hang out, you'll be right where you are meant to be. Translation services. So translation is provided during general sessions using Wordly, and for breakout rooms and networking sessions, we recommend using Google Translate. The GLF workbook can be found under the live event tab on the GLF website. And this workbook is fillable, so it's PDF. You can go in and type it in on text. You don't have to print it out. You can type it in from whatever device you're on. You can print it out if you choose to. But we do recommend that you have the workbook available for taking notes and following along with the program. So with that, let's move into our first panel of today, our first discussion of the day. And want to share with you a quote from Lakeisha Brooks, our new DEIJ director for ICF. And her quote was, "As a coach, it is essential to understand the privilege, advantages, and access that some have to professional coaching, while others do not. Therefore, we need to create an equitable space in professional coaching where everyone can access it when needed." In our panel discussion, we're going to hear from chapter leaders around the world as they share strategies to raise awareness of DEIJ, how to engage inclusive leaders, and identifying the challenges of implementing DEIJ in various chapters around the world. So with that, I'm so excited to bring aboard our panelists who are out there. We have Cassandra. Oh, there we go. Something just popped up on my screen. I got a little confused. I'm all good though. First, we have Cassandra Moore, PCC. Lena Gustafsson, PCC, Tanya Slabbert, and Elizabeth Kerr, PCC. So welcome to all of you. So glad to have you here. And the questions that I'm going to be asking the panelists are included in the chat. Know that you'll have the opportunity to put those questions in the chat, and also in your breakout rooms, share those with the people that you go into your breakout rooms with and have a rich discussion there as well. So with that, panelists, please introduce yourselves, your chapter, and your role within your chapter.
I can start. This is Cassandra Moore. I am the president of ICF Philadelphia, and I am very happy to be a part of this panel today and very excited that ICF is really leaning into DEIJ, as it's so important, not just for the work we do as coaches, but for just community around the world.
Wonderful.
I'll go next. I'm Tanya Slabbert. I'm a newly elected non-executive on the board of the South African chapter. Thrilled to be taking part in this conversation. Extremely important topics and concepts in my homeland too. So looking forward to the engagement.
Hi everyone, I'm Elizabeth Kerr. I'm currently the Vice President of the ICF Hong Kong chapter, and really delighted to be here today. This is such a crucial topic. It's very dear to our hearts as coaches and what we want to be doing in the coaching community. So really pleased to be here to learn and to share what we're learning as well today.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lena Gustafsson, and I am past president of ICF Sweden. And I can simply agree. I'm very happy to be here. And I think that thinking of, talking of, and challenging ourselves on diversity and inclusion is something that we can never do too much of. We need to keep doing it. And I'm really happy to be here today.
Wonderful. Thanks to all of you for being here today and for bringing your passion and your purpose to our discussion as we share with other chapter leaders around the world. So let's dive right in. Let's just get started and have this discussion. And I want to start off with the question of what is the DEIJ need that you see at the chapter level? Cassandra.
So, Tanya, where we see the need in our chapter is really in embodying, sort of kind of what that means, right? People notice what they can see, and for us, it was really making sure that our chapter, our board leaders represented a diverse spectrum. And we're very proud to have a very diverse board across the spectrum. diversity of thought, and it lends to this inclusive nature where everyone has a voice at the table. And I've been hearing from a lot of our members that they're noticing just the shift and the change in how we're leading this coach community. And we do a lot of different things to kind of raise that awareness within the community.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that, Cassandra. Tanya, let's hear from you.
Yeah, I have to confess, first of all, maybe let me just say that when I received this invitation, I jumped at it and sort of responded within half an hour to Nick and her team. So thank you for asking me to participate. But then I spent so much time wrangling and anguishing about these answers and these responses and what would be relevant and what would not and how granular to be or not. And because these issues are just fundamentally, well, they're very close to my heart, but they are so fundamentally important in my country still. And, I might be stating the obvious, but I mean, we are 28 years after apartheid in South Africa, and the divisions and the hurt and the damage and the structural and systemic problems remain. So I'm not sure that I can isolate it to one need. Tonya, I would say that the need is just enormous, but I do think as chapter leaders, in order to raise our own awareness about how DEIJ manifests locally in our communities, we need to engage on the ground, and we need to listen to the challenges that our coaches and our clients find. And then also, what are the barriers to access, and what maybe are some of the homegrown and innovative solutions that they have come up with to overcome these challenges and incorporate it into their practices. And I think if we really do that and we really listen actively and we take that back as learnings, then we are equipped to start looking at some impactful solutions.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Tanya. And it is, given the relatively recent emergence from apartheid and understanding the systemic and institutional issues around diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice that are still being unfolded and will be, right? When you had systems in place for a very long time, it takes a while, but we can actually, maybe it takes forever on some level because we're always trying to evolve and grow, but the awareness that it's there is where it all begins. And that's the starting point to know there are things we need to start shining lights on and revealing blind spots about. So that's how we start. That's how we start. Wonderful. Elizabeth.
Thank you, Tanya. The Hong Kong is an international city which has a long history of coaching. It's an international city where more than 95% of Hong Kong people are local Hong Kong Chinese people who speak a number of different languages. So diversity for us manifests itself in languages. What's your heart language that you prefer to coach and be coached in, as well as the different layers of business of multicultural as well as local layers and how they engage with coaching. And as probably many of you will be aware, there's been some challenging situations, not only through COVID, but also in politics in Hong Kong. And so how do we as a coaching community address the I and the J part while staying out of the politics so that we still have a voice? And so some of that richness of diversity is engaging with the different languages, with the different cultures, has been how we've been engaging as a chapter. So historically, a lot of coaching in Hong Kong has been in English with multicultural companies. Over the last few years, there's been a very steadily growing group of coaches who coach in Cantonese, coachees who want to be coached in Cantonese and Mandarin. And so how do we cater for that? There's also been some changes geopolitically in the region. So the China chapter had to go on pause last year. And so as a region with ICF, us and a couple of other chapters, Singapore, Malaysia, Taiwan, have been engaging. How do we cater to Mandarin speaking coaches so they feel included and can serve their clients well as well? So we're engaging both locally as a chapter, but also as a region with ICF, and always wanting to grow seeing the need for coaching, how coaching can benefit in a number of situations at all different levels of society. So we're trying to engage in a multi-pronged approach, just starting with very small things. That's how we're starting to engage.
Thank you for sharing that, Elizabeth. And it just highlights once again, diversity comes across so many different paths and modes. And I really appreciate your focus on the humans and how do we take care of making everyone feel as included as possible outside of political structures, organizations, anything else. How do we take care of the people, of the coaches and the clients and the people that we're serving in our communities? So thank you for highlighting that. Lena.
Yes, I actually want to switch to perspective a little bit because I see diversity from a power point of view. To me, it's of course on a human level, it's obvious that we are all the same and all alike and all of that. But we also know there's tons of research and experience that shows that diversity well handled eats homogeneity for lunch. So if we want to have a powerful community, if we want to really make use of all the strengths that different perspectives and different coaches bring, then diversity is the way to go. And then we need to have that perspective and look around us and see, okay, so who is not in the room and who am I not hearing right now and how can I bring that in?
Thank you for sharing that, Lena. And that's why the inclusion piece is so important, because inclusion means that I not only have a diverse group of people, but I'm also fully embracing them as they are. We are not trying to homogenize, and we are aware of the equity issues that come up, to your point, Lena, again, around power, and that inherently people have not had access or even felt comfortable engaging in some of the work that we are working with our clients on. So there's so many different, again, facets to what we do beyond just the words DEIJ, but also what it means and how it's played out over the centuries, over the millennia in different parts of the world. So thank you for raising that. Well, let's go to our next question now. And I'd like to ask you all, and I'll start off with Tanya here. How do you raise awareness of the need to address diversity, engagement, inclusion, and justice in your chapter? And you mentioned that this is still something that's evolving given the recent history in South Africa. So I'd love to hear what's happening with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know where to start again, but I think let me start with the individual and personally. You know, how do we work on our own awareness as individual chapter leaders? How do we tackle, and this is particularly important, I mean, I think it's important everywhere, but in South Africa, tackle those perhaps unconscious biases, the prejudices, the assumptions, etc. And perhaps I can give a personal anecdote of my own journey, which started many years ago. But the first time I really sat and looked at this, it was to say, okay, Tanya, you're a white South African, and by virtue of that, you're privileged. And you're privileged as a result of an unfair and unequal society. And what does that mean? It means that I have to own that privilege. Lena talked about power, you know, and power structures. You have to own that privilege. You have to accept that you have had benefits, access to quality education, access to work opportunities and resources that most of the South Africans around you have not benefited from. And then what does that mean? It means that I have, it's my belief anyway, a greater responsibility to contribute within society and to try and redress those imbalances. And how do I do that? By using the privileges and benefits that I have. And then I think there's the next layer where personally we need to go outside of our comfort zones and expose ourselves to people and communities that are different from ourselves and learn from them. And then lastly, I would just say that then you have to take those learnings, in my view, personal aha moments and your general learnings from going outside your comfort zone. And you have to go back into your comfort zone, because those comfort zones are where these assumptions and biases can just remain. There can be groupthink, there's no challenging, there's perhaps resistance to diversity. So important to share those learnings then within those comfort zones.
I always call it expanding our comfort zones, because if, say we go out of it, that implies I'm going to go back in. If I expand it, it actually becomes larger and I can hopefully bring other people in with it. So thank you, Tanya. Elizabeth.
So for us, it's been very thoughtfully engaging with different communities. So of course, what do our members who are coaches want and need? But it's also looking outside of our coaching community. What does Hong Kong society look and need? Now, I'm aware that there's risks to that, because it's what do we think that other people need? There's always a risk there. We have to test that. But we very consciously built engagement with quite a large group of NGOs over the years to understand what their needs are and to very thoughtfully, very carefully offer them, if they would like and would be open to, support, coaching, pro bono, different engagements with them. We're also trying to build links with different businesses, both multicultural businesses, which are maybe a more long-standing supporter of coaching and what coaching can do, but also local businesses who sometimes know what coaching is, don't quite know how it can benefit them, other times don't really know what it is at all, and how can we as coaches start to share with them what it is, but also understand what they need. When it comes to the more political areas, I think of an initiative that we started with a couple of other coaching communities in Hong Kong called Think Broadly, where we offered coaching to a group of university students. So it's trying to understand who are those who are tussling with diversity, maybe sometimes dancing with who's included and who's not included, and then seeing with those communities what could be helpful, what could we build with you, share with you. And at the same time, just plugging back into coaches and saying, look, is this something that would help? Something that many of our coaches want to give time and want to give their efforts to it, give their expertise. And so plugging back in with them and trying to match them together. So often it feels a little bit like a matchmaking business. We're trying to match what our coaches want and need and want to build and can give, and what different communities in Hong Kong do. I don't think we get it right. There's always more opportunity to listen more and engage more thoughtfully. But by plugging into different communities is how we've been trying to do it.
Yeah, if there was one answer, we wouldn't even be here today, right? So we're all working to figure that out. But I love your connection there, that we want to be more of an open system and engage with our community and the people around us. And if we stay closed, we're never going to really understand what the needs are and who is out there who isn't being thought of and who isn't able to be in the rooms that we're used to being in. So thank you. Mm-hmm. Lena, you're on mute there. First one of the day, yay.
It's easier for you to hear me if I unmute myself. Yes, I want to build on that, because to raise awareness and to explore opportunities, which is kind of part of what you are there for as a leader, to do that in your community. I think one important thing is to be able to be uncomfortable in both ways. Be uncomfortable yourself, just facing the fact that we all have biases and we all have brains that make things easy and simplified, and just challenging that every day. But also be okay with being uncomfortable in the group, raising those uncomfortable questions and asking ourselves, what else is out there? What is it that we are not seeing right now? What can we do? What do we want to do? Who needs us? And what do we need? And one way of doing it, I think, is to connect the local chapter with the global organization, because you directly get a lot of diversity just tapping into your region or the global organization. You meet a lot of people from different standing points, and that's a great way to expand your own mind.
When we step into discomfort, that usually means we're on the edge of growth. And the more we are experiencing that, the more we are pushing and expanding those boundaries. Love that, Lena. Cassandra.
Thanks, Tanya. So, when you think about just raising awareness, we do that in a multi-pronged approach for Philadelphia, right? Not only are our chapter leaders wanting to be the change that we want to see, for us, it starts in our vision, our mission, and our values. Diversity is woven throughout that. We are also very intentional about our educational programming, ensuring that we are, bringing educational experiences to our coaches that touch on topics around diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. We also, and I think, most importantly, it's around all of the initiatives that we do and the work that we are bringing to the greater Philadelphia community. And one such piece and body of work that we're most proud of is our SEED program, and SEED is an acronym for Coaching Employees of African American Descent. And when we piloted this program back in July, it was really our call to action for what was happening within our communities with all this civil and social unrest with the George Floyd killing. And we thought, what could we do as a chapter to help raise awareness, but most importantly, bring coaching into the community, specifically to those who would not normally have access to coaching. So what the SEED program offers is providing this offering and access to coaching for nonprofit employees in the Philadelphia area. And while this program is open to all, we definitely care for those applications for those employees that are underserved. And the program also provides our coach community with an opportunity to really contribute to increase their effectiveness by coaching these employees. So we pair clients with nonprofit organizations with experienced volunteer coaches who offer the experience and really bringing forward the value that coaching can bring within our communities.
When we are expanding access, not only are we serving more people, but we're educating them about the power of coaching as well, right? So that creates
Absolutely.
that succession of people who are interested and want to learn more about coaching, and maybe they even want to become coaches themselves, which will bring our diversity even more into what we hope it to be one day within the coaching industry. Love that, Cassandra. You all have so many different initiatives and projects going on and how you're raising awareness. I'm curious as to how do you engage your other chapter leaders and members to continue to explore these types of opportunities to make the chapters more diverse and inclusive? I will start with, I get to pick, Elizabeth.
Communication is without saying it, pretty key. Quite often before we launch an initiative, we will reach out to members to say who's interested. So for example, we recently partnered with Hong Kong Red Cross. They asked whether their board of directors could each be assigned a coach from the community to be coached on their strategy and how to respond to COVID in Hong Kong and different challenges that they're facing. They were very specific in that they only wanted Cantonese speaking coaches. So we then reached out to the community and said, who's comfortable coaching in Cantonese and who would be willing. So sometimes it's about matching what the need in the community is, as well as what coaches need as well. We're also very conscious that a lot of our coaches are building their business and want to be fairly careful about what they offer and how they offer to be in line with that. So sometimes it's building a bridge and communicating. Other times it's working out, within the board, what structures and what processes do we put in place to encourage leaders to grow. So we have a stipulation on our board about the balance of the board. So is that, reviewing that regularly, is that still the right thing? Is that still the right balance? Without it being patronizing or, too judgmental, are we making sure that our board is becoming representative of the coaching community and the Hong Kong community at large? So it's both structural as well as the things that we do. And I guess as volunteer leaders, we always need to have that front of mind so that we can strike that balance.
Communication, and then also putting some very intentional practices in place to make sure that you're reinforcing it so we don't slip into some of those perhaps old mental models that we might have crafted. Wonderful. Lena.
Yes, I think that basically engaging others in this is the same way as I engage others in other parts I as a leader want them to step onto. I kind of walk the talk. I make sure that I carry it with me into the boardroom. And whenever we do things, we open up, just as Elizabeth talks about here, we open up to all the coaches who wants to be part of this. To give people an opportunity. And sometimes some people need a little bit of a nudge, a little bit of extra inclusion. I think this could be something for you, or your experience could be worthwhile here. And sometimes it's just looking at who raises the hand, what comes close to different people. But I definitely think that one thing is to always keep it in mind yourself. It's so easy to slip into your mental models that you're used to and comfortable with. Just keeping in mind that asking yourself the question and asking the room the question, are we thinking of everybody here? What else is out there? Just keep popping that question back in.
It can be as simple as just asking the question, right? That raises the awareness. And I love your discussion about also meeting people where they are. What are your natural strengths? And exposing them to things that they might not be aware of, because how do they know they aren't good at something, or they are good at something if they don't even know it exists? Wonderful.
Yeah. How do you know if you don't try? And working with questions, that's what we coaches do. So it comes natural to just keep doing it. That's how
exactly. Lean into our own strengths. Ask the question and see what comes up. Beautiful. Cassandra.
Thanks, Tanya. So we engage our chapter leaders and our members to explore multiple opportunities. The biggest way that our leaders are engaged is, the fact that we committed to moving the needle and challenging ourselves by setting a goal for us to be the gold standard for DEIJ. And, we engage our members through our membership efforts to, become involved, to be a part of the chapter. We're just recently going through our nomination process, and it's probably, since I've been on the board, the most numbers of folks who are raising their hand and putting their hat in the ring, who want to be involved with what we're doing in the Philadelphia community. And through that process, we are also encouraging people to get more involved. Our community relations efforts through our outreach, whether it's through International Coaching Week activities and/or the Ignite program, we find many ways to partner with other organizations within the Philadelphia community, again, to just spread that awareness around who we are, what we do, and really opening ourselves up within the community to collaborate and be very inclusive about the things that we're doing and what others are doing, and how that brings value back into our chapter for our membership.
Again, connection, communication, education, all of those things to bring people in. Tanya.
Yeah, no, wonderful contributions, and I echo all of that. I was thinking about it in a slightly different way in terms of inclusivity, and just about one of the challenges in South Africa is that we have a very young population, and I would say that more than 75% of our population is under the age of 35. And so if we really are going to ensure that there is representation, diversity, and inclusivity, how do we expand the coaching profession into areas where youngsters might express an interest, but perhaps may not be able to afford it or access it, and what can we do in terms of partnerships and as leadership to encourage that inclusion and to provide them with leadership opportunities. And I just have to add that when I was doing my pre-reading for this, I loved the Mexican chapters, and I think they got an innovation award or something for it, but their approach to expanding their volunteer base, and they were conscious and intentional about it and saying, we want more youngsters involved. We accept that they can't necessarily access these opportunities by virtue of affordability, not perhaps being able to get their training levels up to the right point of credentialing, but that nonetheless we could include them as volunteers. And the manner in which they went about approaching that and seeking their interest and asking them where they would like to contribute was also non-prescriptive in terms of the kind of skill set they wanted, etc. It was basically saying, well, what do you think you can contribute? And I just thought that was fantastic, because if ever there's a practical way, and I look forward to seeing how that works in practice and learning from them, of promoting diversity and getting fantastic innovation and solutions as a result, then that would be it.
Again, reaching out, especially to the areas that we know people are not necessarily as engaged, whether be it from a generational standpoint, from a gender standpoint, from a language standpoint, all sorts of ways that we can start to engage. And I love that comment about what would you like to contribute, right? That's one of our coaching questions that we would ask is, what is that you want to create? What do you want to provide? And let that person bring their best strengths and skills into that environment. Wonderful. Next question I want to tap into, and as we're getting close to starting to wrap up here, I would like to ask, what are the biggest challenges to implementing DEIJ in a chapter or in the coaching world in general? We'll start with Lena.
Yeah, again, I think the main challenge is our own biases in all groups. Maybe the privileged group, maybe the not so privileged. We all have biases around what does it mean to step into something and what does it mean to be in something. So I think one of the main challenges as we are starting to expand our scope and work with different people and add new people and maybe attract millennials or whatever we are trying to do is to remember that the things that are obvious to me may not be to you and the other way around, and just keep that in mind, because believe it or not, I'm old enough to have been that young girl that they put into the board so that they could say that they have young women in the board. And stepping in there, not knowing the codes is also a challenge in itself. So to me, it has been very helpful to have these senior leaders who kind of looked at me and say, what do you need? And now I think it's really important to remember to do that when you are bringing new people in, or in projects or in board or wherever. Try to think of what is obvious to me that is not obvious to you, and how can I help you know the things that makes it easier to go around. But also remember to ask yourself, what is it, what's the perspective that you bring, and how do I as a leader make that perspective visible and give it room in what we are doing? So I think the challenges lie within ourselves, as ever.
As ever, as always, we are the key and potentially the challenge. And your comment about being placed on the board, to say that we had a young woman on the board and then no one gave you the rule book, so you were not even allowed to really understand how to play that game or to engage in a meaningful way. So it's not just getting people there, but are you actually genuinely including them and giving them the information and the opportunities to grow and expand like everyone else has? And
absolutely. And I think it's essential not to be naive, because it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that, well, diversity is something we want and then it should be easy. Like the things we want, it should be easy. It's not. And there are conflicts. There will be conflicts and different opinions and maybe groups that don't go together, and we need to overwork that and overcome that. So don't be naive, but give everybody the chance.
Yeah. And be respectful of someone else's experience. Just because you have an experience, it doesn't mean it's not valid, it's not true. And our biases sometimes can keep those dark shadows dark because we don't see them, we've never experienced them. So how can that be true for you? And
bring curiosity.
And once again, coaching skills. We love it. We love it. All right, Cassandra.
Yeah, so I think about when we talk about inclusiveness and what that looks like, when you think of the challenges, the biggest one for me would be the perception of this being a flavor of the month, the thing to do, but not really as a fabric of our DNA. And I think that for our chapter, we want to make sure that this is not a flavor of the month exercise. This is something that we're weaving into everything that we do. And, just ensuring that when we're inviting people to the party, that we're also asking them to dance, right? That's the biggest thing about being inclusive in this space. And I love Lena's comments about let's not, kid ourselves that this is, easy. Having this intentional focus and keeping it front of mind as leaders is what we will need to do in order to continue raising the awareness, in order to include our members in everything that we do.
That comment about this being sort of a topic now, and recognizing that what sparked in the US with George Floyd, and some people feel that that was an awakening, and it was for many people around the world. But the reality is, for people who are from marginalized communities, that was just one more day in lifetimes of these kinds of challenges. And that there are parts of the world where that challenge is very different. It looks very different in different parts of the world. So it's not just gender, it's not just race. This is about how we treat each other. So that continued awareness that this is not just something that's really interesting right now. This is forever work in the best way possible, hopefully forever work. Wonderful. Tania.
Thanks. I was sort of chomping at the bit to follow in there after what Cassandra said, because I couldn't agree more in terms of flavor of the month of all of that. And I would say a big challenge is cynicism, precisely for that reason, and precisely from the people who've been on the receiving end of exclusion and discrimination, all this, where I was actually talking to a colleague of mine the other day about this, people who are prepared to come on a platform and share and have very difficult conversations and make themselves vulnerable and all the rest, and ultimately feel that they have not been heard and not been listened to, and it actually doesn't translate into anything, and it's business as usual. So that's one challenge, is that cynicism. And how do you overcome that? By having meaningful engagements and courageous conversations around these things, and then listening and distilling that, and then giving feedback and using that information to come up with programs that have impact and are innovative. And the other challenge is this kind of sensitivity and wanting to shy away from it, to Lena's earlier point. You have to have these difficult conversations. You cannot shy away from them. And what I think we can do is look at how we can create safe spaces where there are some rules of engagement, around respect and coming with humility and being prepared to listen to the other. But we have to be brave, and we have to tackle these things. So yeah.
Thank you. Safe spaces does not mean we don't have conflict. Safe spaces mean we are safe to have conflict in a healthy way. Love that. Elizabeth.
I couldn't agree more with the humility of listening, the thinking about growing the future. And it not being a flavor of the month. I guess what I would also build is sometimes it comes down to the really logistical, nuts and bolts pieces that are challenges. So a couple of comments. I see that language is also a challenge for some other different parts of the world, where you have a couple of linguistic communities. English is the language of inclusion. So we, as a Hong Kong chapter, we mainly communicate in English. Should we employ a translator to translate everything we do into 2 or 3 different scripts and written languages? That would make a face-to-face event 3 times as long. Do we stick with picking one language that only gets a little script kind of at the bottom, or do we put in the resources to make it truly open? And sometimes that comes down to cost and time and resource, and sometimes that comes down to a little bit about the manpower and what volunteers we have as well. So I guess the secret is to try really hard, but try and make those choices. Sometimes it's powerful symbolically, and of course we want to make everything truly open to everyone, but that sometimes isn't possible. One answer to that, and I alluded to this earlier, is to work with the region. So I mentioned the China chapter is put on pause. So we have a group of Mandarin coaches who are based in China who want to engage, and sometimes would prefer to do so in Mandarin. So whereas there's not probably one chapter in Asia who can step up and say, look, we'll do all the Mandarin events, as a group of leaders in the region, we can probably work out how we can share resources and do different things. So there's a little bit of coming together to across the geographical and the national boundaries to come up with, how are ways that we can engage and serve this community together. So sometimes it's just being imaginative, but at the risk of just focusing on the pragmatics, sometimes the logistics are the bit where the rubber hits the road, and that's the bit which we have to think through too.
But also the benefit of being part of a global organization, and that we can reach out and support each other and be that backstop when we need it. So I know we're getting really close on time here. We're actually technically at it, but I just do want to ask one last question for any of you who choose to share. Would love to hear, what support would you like to move DEIJ initiatives forward? Anyone who wants to share? Cassandra.
Yeah, thanks, Tanya. So a couple of things, when I saw this question on the panel, being the inclusive leader I am, I reached out to my board because I know that during our board meetings, we bring up all these things that we wish we could have this from global, we wish we could have that. And one of the things that I think is very important, and it comes up a lot, is just reporting data, whether it's diversity representation data that shows our members across, even if it's the US, I get it might be challenging outside of the US, but just the diverse representation of our coach community in the US. So sort of kind of aligning with EEOC, because a lot of the work that we are trying to move forward, we're basing it on the fact that the representation of numbers for those who are in underrepresented demographics, we're basing decisions on this being truthful or not truthful without having data. And I know that that's not something we do today, but we're hoping that that is something that's on Lakeisha Brooks's radar, with just sharing that type of data, and also any data and/or research on the equity of coaching, something that sort of kind of measures or captures who has access to coaching. That would be very, very helpful for our chapter.
Yeah, and data has been important for many years, and that's always a big part of what we do, but getting into it at this level, especially as it relates to DEIJ, is so important. And I can tell you it is very much on Lakeisha's radar from my own discussions with her just yesterday. So know that is on the radar for Lakeisha and for ICF as a whole. So as we start to wrap up, any final thoughts, Elizabeth or Tanya or Lena, as we wrap up here? I know we're short on time, so any quick thoughts you'd like to share?
Just that it's really valuable being part of a global forum. Really appreciate this kind of dialogue that hopefully has given me a lot of ideas, hopefully has given other people, and just to really encourage ICF members to pull into that. But also as a bit of an ask for ICF Global to continue to expand into different languages, we really appreciate that. So just a quick ask.
Yeah, and one much needed. Wonderful. Okay. All right. I've seen wave it off. Well, wonderful. Thank you all so much for this incredible, rich discussion. As you all can tell, we could go on and on and on, because it is so important and so critical to the future growth of our industry and just taking care of each other, and not only as coaches, but also our clients and the communities that we're connected to. So we're now going to transition into our small breakout room sessions to discuss a couple of questions. You'll see them here in the breakout. You'll also see it typed into chat as well. So you'll have that. You have it on the slide as well. But what methods are you or your chapter using to implement DEIJ in your chapter? And just start to draft any ideas that you can take back to your chapter. So with that, we're going to head into our breakout rooms, and we'll see you all shortly. Welcome back, everyone. Here we go. Wonderful. I hope you all had some great conversations, and wanting to check in and hear from a few of you briefly. We've got a few minutes. We want to make sure you have a break here, because it's been a while, but would love to hear from a couple of you. So we have the wonderful Sal Infante, who is our Regional Development Manager for Latin America, who's going to assist me as we get these report outs from a few of your rooms. So just please raise your digital hand, and if you could keep it as brief as possible. But what was your main takeaway that came out of the room, out of your breakouts? Who would like to share? Again, raise your digital hand, and Saul will call you out here.
Oh, hello, everybody. Thank you, Tanya. We have Cassandra with her hand raised.
Hey, Cassandra.
Hey, so in our breakout room, I think for me as a chapter leader, it was refreshing to hear some of the great things that are happening in Brazil and also in the Portland chapter. But I think, reigning overall, there's the need for the language issue, which we heard earlier, the need for data, again, which is something that's big. But I like the fact that most of the groups are starting with themselves, with their chapter leaders first, then bringing their members along the journey, looking for ways where there are cultural differences to have a seat at the table. So for example, in Brazil, because of the differences in the regions, they have one regional representative from that country that sits on the board, which I think is a great way to show inclusiveness.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Cassandra. Next, we have Alasan.
Thanks. Just in our group, we had a lot of chapters from South America, and I'm just going to take one of the issues that was raised. We had Argentina, Ecuador, Mexico, and Guatemala. And the challenge that was raised is around the subscription amount. It's because of the economic environment in these countries, is very high. And because of that, ICF is being looked at as a club of elite, who can afford to pay subscription. So is how do we try and make sure that we take into account the economic condition, and also the payment system is difficult because they don't have, there are certain cards that are not accepted. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing. And
We have
Lena.
we have time for just a couple more, and then we'll get you all into break. So I think we've got a couple more left, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay, I'll be really quick. We talked in our room about the need to build the culture, and maybe it's not in a specific project, maybe it's just in something we do. And we had people in the room who had stepped into leadership in the chapter because they saw that they didn't see their face there before, or they wanted to have that space. But to step in, build the culture, and be that person who does that. And we also talked a lot about that. Building diversity is not allowing people to come into the room or giving room. It's bringing in whole and resourceful people who contribute with a lot and strengthens us.
Thank you very much. And last, we have one. If you would unmute yourself.
Sorry. No, we were having a great conversations in the room with Korea and Brussels, and Tania was briefly with us. And one thing that I feel the same with the Korea is that we have a language barrier because of English, and sometimes people, instead of having time and effort to do something about the diversity, generally we are overwhelmed with a lot of things to engage people and work with who is available. So maybe there are more opportunity to take more actions, but the people are open for that. So we don't have really barriers. The dispute is about the time and what is the role in the chapters. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you, Sal, for helping me gather all these
welcome.
together. Wonderful. And I just saw one thing, and please continue to share from your groups in the chat. And I just shared the last sentence that popped up in the last chat I could see is open our doors wider. And that's really the theme we want to walk away with, is how do we open our doors wider and invite people in and welcome them in to actually engage as they are.